What's up, guys? Today we have Alex Dacus, who's a mental conditioning and operations consultant who works with clients from the MLB, NFL, NCAA football, as well as high school athletes. He's a part of the MOAG Consulting Group, who have helped the likes of Russell Wilson, Alabama football, as well as FSU football perform at the top of their game through elite mental conditioning. So thanks for being here, Alex.
Thanks, Nick. It's an honor and just to hop on here and help you guys out how I can.
Awesome. So first question, do you mind just walking us through exactly what your role is as a mental conditioning coach?
Sure. When we talk about a mental conditioning coach or broadly the field of sports psychology, it's a field that's been around for a while. I'm sure most people listening to this, and a lot of your members and people that you're associated with, have different experiences, with sports psychologists and or what we kind of call, a mental conditioning coach. Um, and roughly, what we do and what I do specifically is, I work with high performance teams, in lockstep with their performance staff. So, when we talk about athletic departments, you kind of have different silos, whether that's the nutritionist or physiotherapy or strength and conditioning or sports psychology. We kind of take the perspective of being on those high performance teams. So we look at it from the perspective of saying, we see the mind as an asset. Quite honestly, especially in the high performance, it's not as we're looking at maybe a 15 to 20%, depending on the sport, level of difference it can make. We kind of work lockstep in the high performance department. So I've had the opportunity to work with a whole range of athletes, ranging from you know middle school kids to Olympic gold medalists, to NFL quarterbacks, and there's you're always kind of the athlete might be different, but the end goal is the same, and that we're always looking to take someone who's good to being great.
Right. And then how do you take that step? I know it can be challenging to take a successful athlete and then take them to the next level. So how is your approach with that?
I think first you got to look at where they are currently and finding it based on the truth. So I think quite often, whether in all levels of high performance, especially in sports psychology, it's been really destroyed by the concept of positive thinking. Now, what I mean by this is oftentimes athletes think they can think their way with magical thinking to the things they want to get. And where we're different is when we talk about somebody, where finding an athlete, maybe they're number 3 on the depth chart, right? And then they want to get to the number 1 spot. You can't magically think your way to get to the number 1, right? It's helping them identify the behaviors and habits that can get them to the second spot on the depth chart, right? And more often, it's not so much what you do, but what you don't do, right? So when we kind of look at an athlete, or even a coach for that matter, or even when we're working with special forces or Fortune 500 companies, is we come from the philosophy of saying, what is it that you can stop doing, right, to get to the higher level performance, because that's more attainable. And in today's world, we're surrounded by so many different solutions, and looking for those fixes. And more often, we believe that you have what it takes inside of you, and you just got to get out of your own way.
Awesome. And then when you are working with these athletes, do you find that it's helpful or, for mental conditioning to not only practice it like before games or training, but make it more of an overall like lifestyle change, if that makes sense? Whether it be like an everyday thing for like 15 minutes, like meditating, or do you specifically focus on,
Yeah,
right before, you have a big meeting or right before you have like a
sure.
game?
Sure. And when you think about things like meditation, while I love that, I do it personally, and for the highest performers, I just think that's, you got to learn how to, you know crawl before you can walk, right? And I think meditation is kind of that 400 level course. And the reality is when we talk to the the highest performers, it's just to say, okay, can we get you engaged in thinking of why the mind's important? And now we talk about that kind of a daily practice. I think, something that we preach is you don't have to be sick to get better. And you can, Russell Wilson talks about this all the time, is to say, if you want to, improve in whatever you want to do, right? You got to understand that, you have to start now. And we talk about the aggregation of marginal gains, and there's a great book by James Clear called Atomic Habits, and talks about, as you get to higher levels, the separation in skill is so minute, it's so small. And what we see is if you want to make a daily commitment, are you stretching your mind? Are you trying ways to optimize your performance? And we come from the point of view to say, while you can have the perspective that sports psychology, mental conditioning is optional, we view it as non-optional.
Right. And then how do you, I feel like it's easier when you're working with, high level collegiate and professional athletes for them to be more
Mm-hmm.
receptive to like mental conditioning. So what advice do you have for high school athletes who, kind of roll their eyes at it? You know,
Yeah, and you know what? Like I'd even look at it another way. Like sometimes the highest performers, at least what I've seen, is they almost might say, "Well, I've got in here and I haven't done it, so why would I do it now?" Right?
right.
So you almost got to say when you're looking at a high school or even collegiate or maybe making that transition from college to the pros is to say, all right, like you can study the guys like Russell Wilson or LeBron James or Tiger Woods, and to say like, okay, if these guys have invested their time, their energy, their money into mental performance, why as a high school athlete should I not do that?
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
So I would say, the reality is, Nick, is you know, I think when we talk about the mind, there's so many different options out there to the consumer on to say, what should I focus on? And there's some great apps like Headspace and tons of good stuff on YouTube, and ultimately it causes a lot of confusion, and not everything is going to work for somebody. But once again, I'll go back to the point of saying just eliminating things that are that we're doing ourselves. Maybe that's not getting to bed at the right time, or maybe cutting it one rep too short, or surrounding ourselves with negative people. Just cutting those things out will make such a huge difference. So when we talk to high school athletes, right, it's instead use your self-awareness to say, all right, here's where I am, this is my reality. If I want to get here, this is the 3-step thing, these are the 3 things I got to do to get there.
Right. And then can you just explain, some of the athletes and specific like college programs you've worked with, and how that
Yeah.
experience has been?
Yeah, so just out of respect of confidentiality and privacy, like I can just kind of give you kind of kind of loose affiliations. I know
Yeah, totally.
it's obviously public, kind of our relationship with Russell Wilson, and through our experiences through University of Alabama and Georgia, now through to Michigan State and University of Oregon. What kind of the what we've, I guess, kind of learned, that's the kind of our message that might differ from other programs, is we make the mindset crucial to the performance program. um, simply, it's something that's integral, and you can look at a guy like Russell Wilson and forming Limitless Minds with his brother, and again 2 other co-founders, including Trevor, and is that they see that the mind is something that's so important. And I guess to kind of go, you can kind of look, bring it back to the athletics, is it's kind of hit or miss throughout all the major sports of, do they have somebody on staff? How many people do they use? Are they on the bench? Are they kind of, more on the medical side? Man, it's so random, and there really isn't a good foothold You like think about the strength and conditioning community or athletic training, right? They're so embedded into these teams, and sports psychology really hasn't, to this day, I think Major League Baseball has done a pretty good job, but there's really not a really uniform, consistent implementation of us, kind of working directly and consistently with different organizations.
Right. And then, being a mental, conditioning coach, what's been the biggest eye opener for you working with
Yeah,
athletes?
yeah, that's a really good question. Um, you know what? When I first got into the field, I kind of came from the perspective of saying, you know what, I'm going to get a lot of resistance. Um, and I thought like I would get a lot of buy-in from coaches as opposed to the players.
Right.
And I found that I've really not run into a player, and thousands and thousands of different athletes. Everyone sees value in this, and what I think has been the eye opener is just how different people deliver sports psychology. Strength and conditioning, like, you know weights are weights, running's running, and stretching. Like, people, it's really kind of consistent. You might have a little like tinkering here or there. Some programs might focus more on speed, others more on power, more flexibility, right? And I thought sports psychology would have had a better established foothold. But with that said, it's like I'm talking to multiple time Olympic gold medalists, big time athletes that we are a lot of our people's heroes, and they've had like zero time dedicated to the mind, and they've gotten to like here, and then you kind of wonder, like, could they have been even a little bit better if they would have invested earlier in their career? So
Right.
it's still in its infancy, and I think it's going to always kind of be in its infancy, at least in the short time being, until we really have it established as even like you think about universities, like there's even confusion. I remember I was an NCAA athlete, and I never really knew where to go. There was like athletic guidance counselors, and who are just tremendous in what they do, but from a performance perspective, I didn't really know where to turn. So who knows, and I'm optimistic, but I think it's going to be an interesting few years here.
Definitely. And then, for high school athletes, a lot of them, when they're in the recruiting process, either have like showcases or ID tournaments
Yeah.
where there's, hundreds of coaches on the sideline.
Hmm.
What advice do you have for them,
Yeah.
to negate those fears?
Super stressful, like, and I've gone through those, and I've bombed, and lots of people have bombed those, and you know what, it's a really interesting, um it's almost like the pressure and the external expectations kind of morph what it is that you've been doing, your whole life up until then, right? Everybody's coming in, and you feel like everything that you've done up until that point is going to be defined in that 1 minute, or whatever time that you have, and whatever it is, depending on what sport it is, and the reality is, there's some truth behind that, and you have to accept that, all these people are coming out, they're going to watch you, and yeah, largely your future is going to be defined in those moments. So that's where we talk about having trust, and specifically trusting your preparation, of saying that, like, all right, so going into this, like, did I have a plan? Do I trust my plan? And as you go out, right, it's just to say, like, I've done the work, right, and then whatever happens,
Right.
right? And then the reality is if we start thinking negatively and thinking about, okay, what are these people thinking about me, right, we're probably going to let that come true. And constantly what we've seen our athletes is that we talk about this concept of neutral thinking, meaning that can we think about the best behavior for that time. When I was an athlete, I only thought there was positive thinking and negative thinking, right? So it had maybe this negative thinking of being stressful, and you know okay, am I going to get my full ride college scholarship out of this? And then I try to reframe that into being positive of saying like, hey, don't worry, everything's going to be great. You're going to have 16, 20 offers after this. Well, you don't know that,
Right.
right? And it's kind of accepting that it's okay. It's okay to be nervous, right? It's okay to have these fears, but it's understanding taking these fears and not letting the behavior, not picking your right behavior, right? So whenever we talk to these kids going into the showcases, it's just, okay, what was a simple formula that got you here? Just do it.
Right. Totally. And then when you are working with different programs, are there like a certain, universal set of principles that you use? For example, like Oregon versus FSU football or Georgia football. Like, do
Mm.
you use the same techniques, and kind of how does that,
Yeah.
work out
So
between different sports and
I
programs?
always think, what's interesting is depending on where you're in the country, the kids are going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I fundamentally don't believe in having a cookie cutter approach, and every coaching staff is different. Whether they come from the same coaching tree, is you always kind of amend it a little bit. But what our core belief, something that I know hold strongly, is the concept of neutral thinking. Every program that we go to revolves around this concept of neutrality, right? None of these programs will ever hear us preaching positive thinking. While I like to be positive, especially in times like today, like right now with the pandemic and
Right.
all the protests going on, like it's really hard to be positive, right? And a lot of our guys, it's tough to resonate with that. So whether it's like I said, special forces, or if it's a program like Alabama to maybe an NHL team or an MLB team, right? Is you'll never hear us talk about positive thinking, but what we do talk about is the power of negative thinking, right? And especially right now, it's super easy to be negative, but what we try to do is try to focus on our best behaviors. What can we do today to maximize ourselves? Because that's all we got, and that's really all we can control is what's our next play.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you, Alex. I super appreciate
Yeah,
you taking the time today. So, thanks again.
absolutely. Wish you guys the best. Take care.